I can see some of you are on the call already. This is Hamish Robertson speaking. I'm the head of marketing up at Lettingweb, and I'm here with Dan Cookson, the head of research. We're just getting the screen set up.
Okay. Well, what I'm showing you here on my screen is obviously the front page of the latest autumn report, which you will hopefully have. And I'll just scroll down to that front page. You've got my lovely mug shot there. So here we go. Actually, what I've got there is the summer report. That's the wrong link. Let me go to the right link. Let's see what we've got. That's the spring. There we go. Okay, so what have we got here? Front page is the autumn report. So that's covering the September, October, November period. One thing about our reports which is unique is we link to a lot of online stuff which we've created, and there's some very powerful sort of map-based content there. What I also do focus on in this report, and I'll touch on this, is families within the PRS, because certainly they do seem to be a target or highlighted by the likes of Shelter and the government themselves, actually. So I for my sins, went off. You'll see census release. I'll actually click on that. Only in November was the relevant data actually published. I'll go back to that page again. Bear with me. Lots of data about the private rental market. And what I did is put it into a mapping software, which I will show you here at the link j.mp/PRS families. If you've got the electronic version of the PDF, you can just click on that link.
I think I've got your interactive map up from your report on another screen.
Go for it. Yeah, have a look at it. I'm going to load that up or endeavour to myself by clicking on that link.
Couples with children. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Now I've just opened that link up multiple times actually, so I'm just going to close one of them. The reason behind that, I mean, that's a heat map.
Ooh, yeah.
But it's pretty. But what it's telling us is where households with children live in Scotland, and the deeper the red, the more there are.
My goodness, look at West Lothian. Yeah. They're all in West Lothian.
That's a mystery. But what you'll also see, if you zoom
on an industrial estate, are you sure?
Well, that's what the census told us. There might be, who knows?
They're on the golf course.
Well, if you zoom in, if you've got a scroll wheel or you click on that plus button at the top, I find using a scroll wheel, if you're used to it, it's quicker. You can sort of grab the map, and it's just like a Google map. You can drag it and move it, which is what I'm doing. But I mean, there's other areas that it highlights. You know, there's lots of barracks. You know,
I thought that would have been something like maybe if it was Linlithgow, I wouldn't be surprised. Although of course the older population, but that is really quite surprising for in between Whitburn and Bathgate. It's even west of Livingston.
I need to ask somebody at the council, in fact, that unless there's a hostel of some kind, who knows?
A lot of families are moving out of Edinburgh though, because it's, you know, less expensive as well. So there is a lot of people shifting into West Lothian.
What is actually saying
kind of migration
is that it's very evenly distributed. I mean, there are concentrations,
right?
But most of those concentrations are actually sort of barracks or military accommodation, because you could go off to
because we got there in Dreghorn. Yeah.
Exactly. So, but what you also see is how detailed that information is, and that's the benefit of the census data. It takes ages to process, but when you get it, it's actually really good. So you can zoom in and get some insights. What I'd also like to show you while we're on this map is top right. You see a little box that says visible layers.
Yeah.
Have you got that? If I click on that, it gives me some other layers of information that I can sort of choose to view. And what I'll do is I'll turn off that couples layer by just clicking on it, and I'll turn on lone parent with dependent children. Now this is a different map, coloured green, but you'll see that it's a different picture, and it basically, what it's telling us is that lone parents with dependent children, that means basically kids under the age of 16, tend to live in the more deprived areas. So that's why you're seeing sort of Pilton, Granton area, Wester Hales here, and if we drag across to Glasgow, I still don't quite know what's going on there in West Lothian, but I'll try and get to the bottom of that one. But if we drag over to Glasgow, again, you'll see pockets in areas that are relatively deprived.
But when you zoom out, Dan, it is quite an even sort of spread, isn't it?
Yes.
As you say.
Yeah. And if I go back to the report itself, I'll just show you here, and go to the bottom of that page. Those charts are quite important. They show, well, those. I don't know if you've heard of the deprivation index. It's a very powerful sort of analysis profile of local areas in Scotland, which the government have done. And in essence, I've categorised them 1 to 10, 1 being the most deprived and 10 being the least deprived. And those charts show the distribution or the counts of households in each of those bands. And it's very even. You know, if we looked at, say, owner occupation, you get a profile that was, majority would be in the least deprived areas. And if you look at social housing, it would be the reverse of that. So it's a remarkably sort of equitable sort of distribution, which is unusual. But I mean, it's important because a lot of the politicians and Shelter are saying the private rented sector is full of, people in poverty, and the evidence does not support that. So that's why this is important. What I'll just go back to that map again, because just another, you can obviously interrogate that, and it's powerful in as much as you move the mouse over, it's actually telling you how many households.
Yeah, saw that. Very good.
All driven by, census-based. That
must have taken you weeks to type them all in.
Exactly. It took me absolutely ages. And then drawing those boundaries was even longer. But anyway, that's somebody's got to do it. What I'll also say is another layer of information on going up top right here, visible layers. I've also included. I'm going to turn off lone parents just for now. I'm going to zoom out. These areas are actually those areas that have incomes, estimated incomes less than £370 a week. Okay, and that's actually taken from a academic, very detailed profile of local income, and we might well do some more work with this in the future. So this is just sort of sitting on the back of other people's work, but it's map based. So in essence, those are where the lesser wealthy, or the lower income live. And if we zoom into Edinburgh, again, you'll see Wester Hales, you'll see Pilton, you'll see Craigmillar, and you'll see even parts of Leith. Those are pockets, and what we can obviously do in the future is look at affordability in relation to private rents, and that's the kind of debate we're going to be involved in going forward, I'd say, because nobody else is doing it at this level. That's the benefit we have of all the agents, well, not all, a very large number of agents feeding data through the Lettingweb and Lettingstats. So I mean, I'll leave that map for now, and maybe go back. Before I do that, I should also say that currently there's about a quarter of households in the private rented sector do have children, and that's up from 23.6% in 2001. So it hasn't been expanding proportionally. It's pretty much the same, and those proportions are very similar to the owner-occupied and the social sector. So if you hear Shelter saying, "Oh, it's there's more families," it's only because there are more families. It's just that because the private rented sector has expanded, doubled. Okay, I'm going to go back to the report. I mentioned those bar charts. I've gone through that family map. That link at the top here, which is actually to the debate, I'll just quickly click on that. Where would that be? Yeah, that's opening up the transcript of the parliamentary debate, which, if you've got 10 minutes and you can scroll through there, but there's some James Kelly's, I think I would say, renowned for misquoting stats. So they come out with figures like 50% of the PRS's households with children, obviously not. And interestingly, they mix up their stats on rent hilariously, actually. I mean, I won't go there now, but they quote some other, I think, Your Moods figures, which are actually pretty woeful, but I won't dwell on that. But I do. You can have a look and see for yourself. Okay. Scrolling down, our infographic is very popular. People like infographics, and what it's obviously telling is actually rents were up in some of the hotspots in the cities. We tend to focus on two-bed properties just for consistency and comparison between cities, but Glasgow saw 12.4% change year on year. So Edinburgh was up 6.7%, Aberdeen up 3.1%. Another link available is this. If you can see on the left-hand side, average annual real private rent increase equals minus 0.1%. That's referencing the Scottish Housing Review, and I've just clicked on that, and that's opened up another link over here. Useful little summary of all sorts of stats produced by these guys in the Scottish Government. I will just scroll down to the page 4, which is their reference to the Scottish Government's own private rented sector stats. Reason I mention it is because they produced this table at the bottom, and it looks at the 4-year change in rents by broad rental market area. There's 18 of those in Scotland, and that figure right at the bottom there, minus 0.1%, that's basically accounting for inflation across Scotland as a whole, and it's telling us rents haven't gone up.
Yeah, very good.
And that is absolutely key.
That's government based? That's a government document.
Precisely. And I'll go onto Twitter actually and show you some of the dialogue I have with some of the people that are claiming.
I really get the sense that the government knows this, but is, as you say, trying to be seen to be politically correct. And the government also is, of course, a landlord. And, I've been looking at this group that was set up against the social landlords. What do they call themselves? They've got a funny EGTM name or something. They're on the panel, the government panel that's done the review.
Yeah. They're anti-social rented.
Sorry, they're something like Edinburgh Tenants for.
Oh, IPTAG.
Yes.
Is it? Yeah. That's the Edinburgh representative group for tenants. No, they have nothing against the social side. They're just against you and land.
Yeah. Against and it seems that they've been formed from a group who actually did have some rogue landlord who lives in Spain, in Costa del Crime. So they've got a case, but obviously they've got a very loud voice that's being heard, perhaps over proportionately.
Absolutely, that's the issue I'm trying to get across here. That we know the vast majority of the sector, and that's why we did the tenant survey, and I'll touch on that in a minute. But there's a very large, the unheard majority that the resident are broadly happy.
Just like the referendum, really.
Well, yes.
The silent majority.
I'm not going to be political on that one, but what I will say though, and this is I did actually. If you do read that transcript, Margaret Burgess was very good in countering some of the nonsense that was being directed at her, and played it all with a very straight bat, and responded with these government rental stats, which are very strongly in our favour. They're not showing runaway. So that's pleasing, and I think we've got to be very, very sort of grateful almost for that, because.
Well, she's been around a while, so yeah.
And I think the consultation responses will be very consistent across the sector, and I think we'll be drawing on all sorts of evidence. But so that's something I would recommend you look at. Going back to the report again. What else have we mentioned? 86% of tenants have never experienced an increase in rents during a tenancy. Social rents have actually increased more than private rents.
Now that I picked up on that as well, Dan. And there's a group of social renters who are campaigning, particularly against Edinburgh City Council, to get them to put a freeze on Edinburgh rents because they've had above inflation rent increases, and I just think that's hilarious.
I'll jump there only because that's the table on whatever page it is what is that page? If you've got it on the report, page 6, I'll show you on that left-hand column of numbers. That's the cumulative increase in rents in social rents. So that's a combination of housing associations and local authority. And if you go down to Edinburgh, they've had a 28.1% increase.
Wow!
It's got to say though, it is from a historically very low base. So
right. It's also over a longer period.
Mm-hmm.
It's 8, 9 to 12, 13. Yeah, I mean they're not comparable. The 10 to 14. Yeah. Exactly. I have done comparative analysis, and it still stacks up. The bigger increases than the private rental, but yeah, it's an issue. I mean, and the social landlords are looking for income cost reductions as well. And there's historically Scottish social rents have been very low. Interestingly, also they have the freedom to set their rents in a way that down south they don't. Down south they're controlled, and they have to set them by inflation plus 1. I think it's CPI plus 1, and is their sort of
all right.
Every rent. Yeah, so they've got freedoms to do that, which I think is good. Because it reflects the market. And
it also means that potentially the social public sector could provide more housing if they can make it pay, and there's a demand for it. But
precisely, that's the debate that we've got to get involved in. There is the whole affordability issue is going to be massive. Rent levels. I think there's a range of rents that are affordable, and there's a massive over demand for social rents. There's a waiting list of over 150,000.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you if you can get rents that are under half the private rental market?
The most frequent dealings that we have with any sort of public sector officials are out in West Lothian, where we run a small portfolio of HMOs. So we get inspected by the licence team, who tend to be quite closely involved with the environmental team and other people in housing.
Yeah.
And you know, just in sort of conversations with them a year or so ago about the new bedroom tax and the effects that was going to have, and the new universal credit and that effects, and all the people in the council of West Lothian housing were just really not sure how things were going to pan out, because what they foresaw was a serious housing crisis whereby existing tenants were going to be made homeless effectively because they could no longer afford the properties they were in due to these two bits of legislation squeezing benefits, and they would then, as the council, be legally obliged to house them. But of course they don't have anywhere to house them other than perhaps putting them in very expensive temporary accommodation.
And it's a mess. It's a complete
mess.
I mean,
it's 22.
I've been to various events and heard that you can see that pain, and there's actually appeals to that whole process. I mean, it's a complete minefield, and I don't actually agree with the legislation, but because it's hugely disruptive, and I don't think it's actually going to achieve the sort of cost savings that they were trying to achieve. Anyway, I mean, back to us in terms of PRS. I mean, what I've got on screen here is another little sort of gem of information that helps the PRS to describe itself. That little bar chart, weekly income distribution by tenure, 2013. That comes from a very important survey, a rolling survey that the government do called the Scottish House Condition Survey. Okay, and that's like their benchmark for understanding the housing market, on an ongoing basis, not just because they can't rely on the census because it's only done every 10 years. But that profiles income by tenure, so you can basically see. What's remarkable, I'd say, is that the profile of the private rented sector is almost identical to the owned outright. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Which absolutely disproves this sort of vision of the PRS as victims and poor.
Yeah. But we have heard for a long time that there was a sort of a new era of professional renters long term who wanted the freedom of renting without the burden of owning, and that does seem to reflect that.
Well, I'd say so. So there's lots of room to use that. I have.
Social and the mortgaged are opposites, aren't they?
Exactly. Absolutely. And what's interesting, Joseph Rowntree Foundation put out a report recently, which came out with the most outrageously, catastrophic headline, which was saying that there was going to be sort of 6 million people in poverty because of rent rises in the private rented sector by 2040. And I know that some of the academics that wrote it and sort of questioned them on it. Anyway, this basically.
Yeah, you lost us there. We were talking about nail polish. Sorry, Dan.
You're talking about what? Oh, sorry.
Moved on from Kit Kat.
I've bored you. Okay, I'm being boring, obviously.
Yeah, spice it up a bit. Your report is fantastic, mate. I mean, I am really blown away by the interactive nature of it.
Good. All right, I'll move on.
Okay.
Because we're probably the survey. This is also very powerful. This is the summary findings of the biggest tenant survey carried out in the UK.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
Okay, so this is thanks to Hamish. We managed to email over 200,000 people over at the end of November and December. These were all people that had shown interest in Lettingweb, well, in the portal over 3 years. So there's a lot of contacts, and we were very pleased to get feedback from 8,626 of them. Which is the big number there is 6,448. That's basically those that are currently living in the private rented sector. So that's a huge number. across Scotland.
But 2,000 were willing to respond to say that they no longer rented but had opinions.
That's correct.
Yeah. The first question was, have you ever lived in the PRS? And then the second question, are you currently living in the PRS? So we basically have, and we wanted to include those that were no longer in it, but had that experience. But for the purposes of this analysis, we went with just those that are currently in the PRS, which is still a very good number. And it probably won't surprise you in terms of feedback profile. We'll be doing more analysis of these findings, so we can drill down and by geography, by any of these sort of variables. So it's a very rich data set. We had 28% of our respondents lived with children. That's interesting. Or 21.6% with dependent children. What other highlights have we got? That proportion of monthly household income spent on rent is a key one. You can see it's a distribution, and the majority is spending less than 40%. More than 50% is slightly concerning, but I mean
it is, yeah.
People do make choices, or have to make choices sometimes.
Well, that could also be due to. I mean, that kind of thing happens if you lose a job, or your circumstances change.
Or if your partner leaves and suddenly your joint incomes have gone halved. Stuff happens. And
ideally, you wouldn't be taking on a property where it's more than 50%. That would raise alarm bells with most landlords.
Well, the threshold is 40% on any of the sort of credit checking systems. You'd be very hard pressed to get through that process if you're over. That's our view. And then you've got a sense of how long people have lived in their current rental property. That's likely to be slightly skewed by lesser, in as much as the sample frame is those that we're looking. We haven't gone out to everybody in the private rented sector. It's only those that have sort of moved in the last 3 years.
Yes.
But it's still better than anybody else's data, and I'll be frank about that. Reasons for moving, we've got top right here. That's the key one. Have you ever been asked to leave a property for a reason that was not explained or that you considered unreasonable? So 5%, 95% positive or non-negative response is very good there, I'd say. And also the proportion that have actually ever experienced a rent increase during a tenancy. So these are very good numbers. What you'll find is that
5% sort of dispute percentage. No, I wasn't noisy. Those neighbours were wrong. The landlord was a stiff, or whatever. That's not a bad rate at all, is it?
Well, I would have thought so, but it's interesting when you get into dialogue with people like Generation Rent, Alex Hilton, who's getting a lot of media coverage, certainly down south. He would turn that figure, multiply it by everybody in the private rented sector, and say that's 500,000 people, and come up with a scary big number. And it's just they'll twist and spin anything. So you've just got to be wary of that. And then we've got satisfaction levels with management by letting agents stroke landlord.
That's good to know.
Interestingly, we can split that by whether they do use a letting agent or it's landlord managed. Landlords actually come out slightly better than agents on that. And then you've got continuous years lived in the private rented sector. So I mean, this is an overview, and we will be making the full results available.
No, just explain to me what you were saying there, Dan, about the comparison between letting agent and landlord.
Okay, what I'm saying, that summarises all responses. We can split that data by those that have a property managed by an agent and those that are landlord managed.
Right, okay. But you haven't in this report.
We haven't in this report, but
right.
What it tells us actually is that landlord managed come out better.
Yeah, that is interesting. That is very interesting. I can believe it. You know, from a personal point of view, I think, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? And it's not great for agents, as you say. It's not a good result, really.
We didn't go big on that, but it's also, you know, it might be a cottage industry. I think personal communication. There's a benefit of being small in this business.
Well, absolutely, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there. And when you consider that, I guess proportionately, letting agents will be, the market share will go to the larger agents. They, of course, that is their biggest weakness: communication with the tenants and things getting falling through gaps.
That's what you see when you see consolidation. You know, you hear the stories. You know, that those relationships break down, and one of the slides is not shown here, and it was something we recognise and will to comment on, is response times to repairs they're not particularly.
Well, here's an interesting stat for you, which we picked up on our professional property investment training years ago. It was said to us as landlords, if we were looking to recruit and use the services of another agent to find out what their staff to properties ratio was, and anything greater than a 30 properties per member of staff would mean that you would not have, you would be unlikely to get a really good personal knowledge of the property and the tenants and the landlords.
What I say that another unique aspect of our report is that we're really doing very detailed analysis of the sales market. It probably doesn't come out that clearly, but this table I'm showing you now is key. At the local authority level, we're looking at average flat prices. The reason I focused on flats is that that's about 80% of the rental market. So that really is the key market for landlords, certainly in cities. And you can see price changes do go up and down relatively dramatically. I'd be wary. I've used October to October comparisons there. That 14% is a typo, by the way, so that's that column heading. I'll remove that. Maybe the overall figure down at the bottom for Scotland shows that flat prices have gone up 5.7% over the year, currently standing at 132,000. Now, I actually think the volumes of sales are actually more important to the rental market, in as much as first-time buyers are back in the market, and we think that that's a reason why rents have actually been increasing, is that the supply of rental property has taken a bit of a dip, possibly, as some of those potentially reluctant landlords have sold because that market has picked up. So that chart is showing the sort of 10 years of sales data, and you can see it took such a hammering in terms of volumes of sales in the credit crunch, and then it's beginning to pick up. And I think just under 3,000 flats changed hands in October. And as ever, I've done a map. So if I open that map up, and you can do the same, flat price map, which I'll go here. This, even though I say it myself, is very good stuff, because it's at a neighbourhood level, which is much more useful than postcode district, which is what most people publish. So if we go in on Edinburgh, these boundaries are actually official, they're called intermediate data zones, but they've got a name. In most places they've got a name, certainly Edinburgh. If we go over to East Lothian, they've actually got codes IZ10, 13, rather boring, but in essence, in most key markets, these boundaries have a name which makes sense. And if I click on that, or if you click on that, you'll see some summary information about the sales market. This is just flats, and I think I've got. Let's think. Yeah, that's October. I'll need to remember what that figure actually is. It might be I do tend to like to smooth. That might be the year-to-date figure for the average, because these are small areas. You don't get enough volume of sales to do month-by-month analysis. But anyway, you can see that it's Dean, West End, and West Coast. There were, in the year to October 2014, 208 sales. In the previous year, equivalent year, there were 163. So the market's picked up a bit there, and prices have picked up a bit as well. Just looking at that example, and we could go to say Leeds Docks. You can quickly get a sense of if in a particular area, you get a very nice summary of what's been going on in the sales market. There's more that we could do with this in terms of time series analysis, but it does give a good sense of a market. I'll just highlight Glasgow and see how different it is to Edinburgh.
Yeah, that's good.
What's useful, I mean, I don't know if the Govan Hill is in the news for all sorts of reasons, not least there's masses of inward migration from sort of Bulgaria and Romania, and the council are struggling coping with it. And there's a lot, anyway, if I click on Govan Hill East, you can just see how much, the prices are coming down, and the sales market basically collapsed there, for want of a better word. That's just, these things happen, but you need this very local level data to actually sort of reveal these kind of things. So that's the sales data. I'll go back to the report. So have a play with that.
Very good.
The rest of the report summarizes, in essence, the information that you can see via the maps. We also have a postcode breakdown. And last but not least, I'll just, on each of these city maps, so I've actually included specific Edinburgh data from the report. So that chart at the bottom for Edinburgh looks at the profile in terms of household income and how much income is spent on monthly rent. So you get a...
Dan?
Yes?
I'm going to have to be very rude. Mike's just come in and reminded me that I'm picking up the kids early from school today to take them shopping in town.
Hamish, that's absolutely fine, Jonah.
But this has been great. So please invite me to the next one, because it's fascinating stuff. I'd like to involve, now that I know what this is about, I'll bring Mike to the next one and let him explore it. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, if there's nobody else, I'll just close the session just now. And of course, we're around if anyone wants to speak to Dan separately or look at any of their reports, go through anything with Dan. More than welcome. And thank you.
Thanks.